My family thought they were teaching my deaf son a lesson about fitting in. That was genius, my nephew smirked. You should have seen his face when he figured it out, his mother chimed in. I didn't shout, I just started packing. By the next morning, we were gone. When they finally realized what had happened, I had to look twice. My parents, my sister Janet, and her two kids, Kyle and Emma, all standing in the cabin's main room, confused, acting like they couldn't understand why we'd left. But Marcus wasn't with them anymore. My son, 16. I was already loading our car in the driveway, thinking about how quiet the drive home would be. But this time, the quiet felt like peace. Let me back up. The family reunion invitation came in April. Janet's idea, a week-long retreat at a rented cabin in the mountains. We've been practicing, she texted me. Kyle learned some signs. Emma too. Marcus will love it. I should have known better. But Marcus had been so excited when I told him. His eyes lit up in that way they do when he thinks he's finally going to connect with his cousins. The first red flag should have been Kyle's greeting when we arrived. He waved enthusiastically and signed what he thought was welcome but was actually banana nice to see you. Marcus smiled anyway and corrected him gently. Kyle laughed it off. Close enough, right? My mother appeared next, arms wide, speaking slowly and loudly directly into Marcus's face.
How are you?
Sweetie. Like volume was the issue. Like he couldn't see her perfectly well from a normal distance. David, my husband, caught my eye and raised his eyebrows slightly. He's hearing, but he's been learning ASL since we started dating 8 years ago. He's better at it than most of my family members who've known Marcus his entire life. They're trying, I whispered to him as we carried our bags inside. Trying what, exactly? He whispered back. I didn't have an answer for that. The cabin was beautiful. Huge windows overlooking the lake, stone fireplace, enough bedrooms for everyone. Janet had done well. She met us in the living room with her arms crossed, smiling that smile she's had since we were kids. The one that says she's in charge. We have such a fun week planned, she announced. Hiking, kayaking, game nights. And we made sure everything includes Marcus. Marcus was across the room, trying to follow a conversation between Kyle and Emma. They were talking fast, not facing him, and I could see his frustration building. He kept tapping Kyle's shoulder to get his attention, but Kyle was too caught up in his story to notice. That's great, I said, walking over to Marcus. What are you all talking about? Emma looked up. Oh, we were just telling Marcus about the hiking trail we want to do tomorrow. He said he can hike just fine. I translated, even though I hated having to. Oh, Emma said brightly. Well, if you're sure. That should have been red flag number 2. But I told myself they'd warm up. They just needed time. Day 1 was a series of small cuts. Uncle Paul talking about Marcus like he wasn't in the room. How's he doing in school? Still in those special classes? Aunt Patricia asking if he'd ever consider a cochlear implant. I read they're doing amazing things now. Marcus handled it with more grace than I would have. He answered their questions patiently, corrected their assumptions politely. But I could see it wearing on him. That evening during dinner, my father raised his glass. To family, he said, looking directly at me and David, completely bypassing Marcus. And to bringing everyone together. I translated the toast for Marcus, who smiled and raised his own glass. But I noticed no one was looking at him when he did. Day 2 brought the activities Janet had planned. Kayaking on the lake. Sounds inclusive, right? Except they paired Marcus with Kyle, who spent the entire time paddling ahead and shouting instructions that Marcus couldn't hear or see. When Marcus tried to signal that he couldn't understand, Kyle just paddled faster. He's not very good at this, Kyle announced when they finally made it back to shore, 20 minutes after everyone else. Maybe water sports aren't his thing, Janet said sympathetically, like Marcus had some kind of deficiency instead of a communication partner who couldn't be bothered to face him. That night, David found me sitting on the back porch, staring at the lake. You okay? He asked, settling beside me. I keep making excuses for them, I said. In my head, I'm thinking, they don't know better. They're trying. It's not malicious. But I spend 40 hours a week advocating for deaf clients who deal with exactly this kind of thoughtless exclusion. And here I am, letting it happen to my own son. David nodded. Marcus asked me something today while you were inside.
What?
He asked if I thought they actually wanted him here, or if they just invited him because they had to. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. That some people don't know how to make room for others, even when they think they do. Day 3 was when everything changed. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard voices from the living room. Janet, my parents, Kyle, and Emma having what they thought was a private conversation. We need to talk about Marcus, Janet said. He's not really participating.
He seems so distant, my mother added.
Unfriendly, even.
Kyle's voice.
I keep trying to include him, but he just stares at me. It's weird. Maybe he's just not used to being around hearing people, Uncle Paul suggested. My father's voice was the one that made my blood run cold. Elena coddles him. Always has. No wonder he can't function in the real world. I stood frozen, coffee mug halfway to my lips. Janet continued. I've been reading about this. Sometimes deaf kids get too comfortable relying on accommodations. They never learn to adapt. What are you suggesting? My mother asked. Tomorrow, we try something different. We only communicate with Marcus through speech. No signing, no writing things down, no special accommodations. He needs to learn to meet us halfway. That sounds harsh, Uncle Paul said, but not like he was objecting. More like he was testing the idea. It's for his own good, Janet replied. Elena's turned him into a victim instead of teaching him to overcome his challenges. I set the mug down carefully, my hands shaking. 16 years. 16 years of family dinners where I translated everything. 16 years of making excuses for their thoughtlessness. 16 years of watching my brilliant, funny, capable son shrink himself to fit their narrow idea of normal. And they thought I was the problem. I walked back to our room where Marcus was reading. He looked up and sighed. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do they talk about me when I'm not around? The question hit me like a physical blow. Why do you ask? Because sometimes I can see their lips moving and they look at me, then look away quickly. I know that look. I sat down on the bed next to him. My son, who I'd raised to be proud of who he is, was starting to doubt himself because my family couldn't see past their own limitations. What have you been able to understand? I asked. Marcus hesitated, then signed. More than you think. Day 4 arrived with Janet's plan in full effect. At breakfast, she made an announcement to the family, but not to Marcus. Today we're going to help Marcus practice his speech skills. We'll only communicate with him verbally. No signing. She said it like she was doing him a favor. I started to object, but Marcus touched my arm. He'd been watching Janet's lips. Let them try, he signed to me. I want to see what happens. And so began the cruelest 8 hours of my son's life. They spoke to Marcus but refused to sign or write anything down. When Marcus tried to sign back, they shook their heads and pointed to their mouths. Use your voice, Kyle kept saying. Come on, just try. Marcus could speak. He'd had years of speech therapy. But like many deaf people, he was self-conscious about how his voice sounded. It was something we'd worked on together, building his confidence, letting him choose when and how to use his voice. Now, they were forcing it. I watched my son's confidence crumble in real time. He started the day standing tall, ready to prove himself. By lunch, his shoulders were hunched. By dinner, he'd stopped trying to participate in conversations altogether. The final straw came during their planned game night. They'd chosen charades, thinking it would be perfect for Marcus. Except they weren't signing the categories or giving him any visual cues. They expected him to guess based on verbal clues he couldn't hear. Come on, Marcus, Emma said, frustrated. We're saying it right to you. Kyle threw his hands up. This isn't working. He's not even trying. That's when Marcus stood up and walked out of the room. I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, crying. In 16 years, I'd seen Marcus cry maybe 3 times. He was the strongest person I knew. They think I'm broken, he signed through his tears. They think you're broken for having me.
Marcus, no.
That's not. Mom, I heard them. Yesterday, today, all week. I've been reading their lips. My blood turned to ice. What did you hear? And then my son, my brilliant son who I'd raised to advocate for himself, told me everything. Uncle Paul, Elena should have pushed him harder when he was little. Maybe he'd be more normal now. Janet, she treats him like he's made of glass. No wonder he can't handle the real world. My mother, such a burden on Elena and David. They could have had normal children. Kyle, I bet he's not even really deaf. He probably just likes the attention. Emma, my mom says deaf people can do anything, but Marcus just seems limited. With each revelation, something inside me crystallized. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More final. How long have you been able to read their lips? I asked. Since I was 12. You taught me it was a useful skill. I had. I'd encouraged him to practice lip reading as a tool, a way to access more information in the hearing world. I never imagined he'd use it to discover how cruel that world could be. Marcus, I said carefully, would you be willing to show them what you heard? His eyes widened. You mean tell them I know? I mean show them exactly how well you can adapt to the real world. 20 minutes later, I called a family meeting. Everyone gathered in the living room, looking pleased with themselves. Janet actually smiled at me. Elena, I hope you can see the improvement. Marcus tried so much harder today. He did, I agreed. In fact, he's been trying all week. Haven't you, Marcus? Marcus nodded and stood up. He looked at each family member in turn, then began to speak. His voice was clear, measured, and devastating. Grandpa, yesterday you said Elena should have pushed me harder when I was little, so I'd be more normal now. My father's face went white. And Janet, you said I was a burden on my parents and they could have had normal children. Janet's mouth fell open. Kyle, you said I probably wasn't even really deaf and just liked the attention. Kyle started to sputter a denial. Emma, your mom told you deaf people can do anything, but you said I seemed limited. Emma looked like she wanted to disappear. Marcus wasn't done. Uncle Paul, you wondered if Mom coddles me. Grandma, you asked if I'd ever consider fixing myself with surgery. You all spent this week talking about me like I couldn't understand. Like I was stupid instead of deaf. The room was dead silent. But here's what you didn't understand, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. I heard every word. I've been reading your lips since I was 12. Mom taught me it was a useful skill for adapting to the hearing world. He paused, looking at each of them again. You wanted me to adapt to your world. I did. I heard every cruel thing you said about me and my mother. How's that for adaptation? I had never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. Janet found her voice first. Marcus, we didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said quietly. You absolutely meant it. Because if you didn't mean it, you wouldn't have spent 4 days systematically trying to break down my son's confidence. We were trying to help, my mother protested. No, I said. You were trying to fix something that was never broken. And in the process, you showed us exactly who you are. I stood up. Marcus, go pack. We're leaving. Elena, don't be dramatic, Janet said. We can work this out. There's nothing dramatic about protecting my child from people who think he's defective. We don't think. You do. I interrupted. You think deaf means less than. You think accommodating differences is coddling. You think my son needs to be fixed to be worthy of your acceptance. I looked around the room at these people I'd spent 37 years trying to please. But here's what you never understood. Marcus doesn't need your acceptance. He never did. I just thought he deserved it, because you're family. David was already heading upstairs to help Marcus pack. Smart man. Where will you go? My mother asked, like we were helpless without them. Anywhere that understands the difference between inclusion and assimilation, I said. We were packed and in the car within an hour. As we drove away, Marcus signed from the back seat. Mom, are you okay? I looked at him in the rearview mirror. My son, who had just advocated for himself more powerfully than most adults ever could, who had turned their weapon against them with grace and intelligence. I'm perfect, I signed back. How are you? Free, he replied. We drove to the nearest city and checked into a hotel. Over the next 3 days, we did everything Marcus had wanted to do that week. We visited the local deaf community center. We went to a silent film festival with live ASL interpretation. We found a bookstore that specialized in deaf culture and history. Marcus came alive in ways I hadn't seen all year. On our last day, he started a TikTok account. His first video was called, What Happens When You Assume Deaf People Can't Hear You? He recreated some of the conversations he'd overheard with his own commentary. It went viral within hours. The comments poured in. Other deaf people sharing similar stories. Hearing people expressing shock and support. My family apparently saw it too. Janet called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. My mother texted, People at church are asking if this is about us. I replied, Ask yourself why you're worried about that instead of how Marcus felt. Kyle's response came through Emma's Instagram. Tell Marcus I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I showed Marcus the message. He laughed and signed. How else could he have meant it? 6 months later, Marcus has over 1 million followers. His videos about deaf experiences, sign language, and advocacy have been featured in major media outlets. He's spoken at conferences. He's become the kind of advocate I always hoped he'd be, but on his own terms. The family reached out a few times in those early months. Non-apologies mostly. We were just trying to help. You're being too sensitive. Marcus needs to learn to live in a hearing world. I stopped responding entirely. Last week, Uncle Paul called David at work. Apparently, people in his office had seen Marcus's viral video about lip-reading family secrets and were asking if he was the uncle from the video. David told him, Now you understand what it feels like when people talk about you like you can't hear them. Here's the truth. I don't regret leaving that cabin. I don't regret cutting them off. I don't even regret the years it took me to see clearly. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes advocacy means walking away from people who will never see your worth. My family thought they were teaching Marcus a lesson about fitting in. Instead, they taught me exactly who they really were. And honestly, we're so much better without them. Marcus signs to me every day now. Thank you for choosing me. But the truth is, he made it easy. When you're choosing between people who see your child as broken and a world that sees him as whole, there's really no choice at all. What do you think? Was I right to walk away from family who couldn't accept my son as he is? Or should I have tried harder to bridge the gap? Let me know in the comments. I'd really love to hear your perspective. And if you want more stories like this, go ahead and hit subscribe and tap the bell.